for your game pleasure, the 5th and final Bachman Ferrari Collection. Let's get good.
Here we go. All cars in Bachman, no reserve. Listen to that thing rumble. Wow. Hey everyone, William Ross here from the Ferrari Marketplace and Garage 65. I'm doing this little intro right now this way for this next episode that you're going to be watching that goes over the truce, clarifies a bunch of stuff regarding the Bachman Collection, some great inside stories with Chris Miele from Prancing Horse Nashville, who was integral in bringing the Bachman Collection and John Shirley's 250 GTO to the Mecum auction in Kissimmee, Florida, the past weekend, week and a half ago, whenever, depending on when you watch this episode. So please stay tuned. What happens is when we start talking, I hit record, but there was some really cool stuff where we really kind of jumped in where I technically started the episode, but I wanted to include that as well because there's some really great stuff in there. Chris was getting ready. He's going over to Retromobile by the time I'm recording this and putting this all together. He's probably on a plane now flying to LaGuardia or Newark or something like that, then over to Paris. So I should say the UK first, and he'll kind of tell you about what's going on. So I want to do this separate intro, introduce you to who's going to be on there. Just me, just myself and Chris Miele. So please enjoy. Remember, hit that like and subscribe button, guys. That really helps us kind of, gain some momentum here and what we're going to be doing in 2026. So appreciate it. So keep watching. It's awesome stuff, and it clarifies and tells the truth about the Bachman Collection. Keep watching. Appreciate it.
We're packing, so you know the deal. We're getting out of here early in the morning because we're playing the Storm game. So
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you fly, what airport you fly out of? Orlando or Jacksonville?
I'm flying out of Orlando. I'm going to Newark, and then I got a little bit of a layover there, and then Newark tomorrow night because I had to get out of Nashville because they're closing the airport like at midnight. They're going to start getting pounded. So yeah. I didn't have a choice.
Yeah, when you first immediately said, I'm like, oh crap, Nashville. Oh, wait a minute, he's in Florida, so he'll be our. You just get out of there. You'll be good.
I had to go south to go north.
Yeah, yeah, I know because Retromobile. That's one of my bucket list things, but I've already got my tickets for New York Retromobile this year too. So I think that's going to be rather intriguing
awesome.
Show they're going to put together.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I used to do the auto show because I was one of the New York dealers for many, many years. So I did the auto show all the time for at the Jacob Javits. So it's going to be fun. It's definitely a challenging place to do an auto show at because it's just, I think it's the largest square foot building, or at least it was in North America. I mean, it's just massive. It's several city blocks in New York City.
Yeah.
So I'm excited, and I don't know how much of they're going to take because when they do the New York Auto Show, they took the entire building. It was just massive. But again, I'm not sure what they're going to do. But if they do it anything like they do in Paris, Paris it's a lot going on, but it's there's multiple buildings there.
Yeah.
The Bologna Auto Show, candidly, is one of my favorite now. I first year I went was this year, but Paris is just, it's over the top with the stands and everything that they do. The Bologna one's more geared towards obviously Italian cars, whereas, that one in Paris is international.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's going to be a good time. How long are you going to be gone for?
So Monday, I go to Red Bull in Cosworth on Monday. Tuesday, I'll be at McLaren because Zach Brown's here at Daytona. I was just with Danny Sullivan and Danny. They're all out there. I actually, as soon as we get off the phone, I got to call Giuseppe Risi because Risi's running one car in the 24. So, and they run our challenge team. So for us, we have a good relationship with them. And
Zach should be happy. Very,
Yeah,
very happy.
Zach's running an old Jaguar is what he's running. So he's out there and they have like the historic 24 that they're doing. So, he's out there doing it. So it's exciting.
I saw he just won that verdict against Palau.
Yeah, and that's huge because I think the legal fees for him are like 10 million. And and I think I forget the exact legal term, but Chip Ganassi agreed to cover all the legal fees for Palau. So he's got like another 10. So it's probably going to be a $20 million bill for Ganassi, which is a massive, massive number. And just in legal fees, but that's big. And the kid's a hot shot. I met him at the 500 this year. And Scott Borchetta is, a friend and one of our clients at the dealership. He's in Music City, and he was one of the sponsors with Borchetta Bourbon. So we were at the 500. We were in Victory Lane. We were up there, when they were popping they lift the car up and everything.
Yeah.
So we were up there. It was like surreal, like to go to the 500 and,
I bet,
they got a 33 car field and you look and you're like, yeah, I wonder who's going to win. And in your head, you're like, okay, I got a 1 in 33 shot, and you hit it and, your guy wins, and he just checked out. I mean, the guy was quick, and he's a super cool guy. So it was cool. It was really surreal. We all went and, we had a fun time. And then, this, honestly, the last 12 months have been great. Dana just actually was calling, and Dana said to me, I said, hey, I'm jumping on this podcast. So I said, I got to ring you back, but we got to catch up on everything that's been going on, because the last couple of days I flew back up to Nashville to get some stuff at the store done. And now I'm on my way to Retro. So I'm going to stop in London and, just do a pit stop, like I said, at Red Bull, and obviously to stop at McLaren, because I have a client with me who is client of both of them. So I said, okay, well, we'll do a pit stop while we're going on over, and then off to Paris on Wednesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They got an RM auction that's over there, so that's on Wednesday. And then before you know it, you're on a plane, you're coming back, and getting ready for the next event, which is Cavallino in Palm.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's just like a blur, I mean, last year I did something like 150 flights total for the year. So it's going to be interesting for Cavallino being at the Boca now. I mean, I'm excited. I think it's going to be good. Yeah, it's going to be good. I think it's better that it's going to be, when you looked at the lawn at the Breakers, you're always limited to that one green that was right out front. So, now look, they were smart about it. They have a lot more space at Boca Raton, but I think they're still limited. They're somewhere around 175 cars, give or take. And they could have obviously went probably double that. They got enough space to do it, but they're smart because, you still want to keep it. I don't want to say somewhat you want intimate like it is in, when you look at the event that's in Modena, or if you look at the one that's in the Middle East, it's a great event, but the field is definitely somewhat limited. Whereas in the US, that's the original event. It started obviously at the Breakers, many, many years ago. And it's been, an amazing event over the years. But now when you look at it, it's really different. It was such an intimate event for many, many years. And now when I look at it, I don't want to say it's got like that Las Vegas feel, but it's got a lot of the glitz and glamour. And candidly, I went to the Las Vegas Concours this year, and I think that's like one for the ages. Quick. Yeah, and I really, really feel it's got that Las Vegas, pizzazz behind it. Anywhere you book, you go to Palm Beach, and I haven't been to Boca for an event. I've been to the Boca Raton, but you go and you want to go out to dinner. The restaurants at the hotel were like, maxed out unless you made reservations way in advance. Sort of like Pebble. You go and you're saying, hey, what do you guys feel like eating tonight? They're like, hey, let's go for fish. Okay, let's call a couple. No, we're totally sold out. Yeah. No, we're totally sold out. Yeah. Whereas in Vegas, they're so used to seeing, 40 million tourists a year. No matter what you wanted to do, you pick up the phone and say, hey, what do you guys want to do? Yeah, we got a table. Come in like 15 minutes, and all the casinos have restaurants, and they're top flight restaurants. It's over the top. So for us, it was awesome. And normally all the stuff that usually it totally stresses you out, where you get there and you say, oh, damn, I'm going to have to go ahead and, get in the car and, we're going to get over there. We're going to sit in, crazy traffic. I mean, it was just like, it's Vegas, right? You're like, okay, this is jump in an Uber, go over there. It was real easy. You can walk the strip if you wanted to go somewhere else, get out and stretch your legs. It was awesome. The weather's super consistent, obviously, at that time of the year. So the days were like 80 degrees. There's no humidity. You're feeling good. The nights were a little cool. It was okay though. It was good to just, you had a light jacket on, you're walking around. Actually, it was warmer in Las Vegas than it is in the summertime in Bevel. But so we had some fun, but it was a good time. It was enjoyable. Yeah, it was all good. Yeah. So
cool.
Good things. Happy days.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. It's it's great to see where everything's going. And it's going to keep going. It's just everything. Just the energy is just phenomenal. It's just it's getting in everywhere. It's like it's fantastic to see because it's just people putting together these great events, really putting thought into it and everything like that as well. So it's really good to see. So it's exciting stuff.
Yeah,
most definitely. All right, let's kick this off.
Okay.
Welcome to the Ferrari Marketplace podcast. I have my good friend here, Mr. Chris Miele from the Prancing Horse Nashville, who hopefully maybe we can coax a little bit more to be on here more consistently because, he's a wealth of information. But we're going to go today. We are going to discuss the Mecum Kissimmee auction, specifically the Bachman collection, and maybe touch a little bit on the GTO. And Chris was very integral in bringing the collection and the GTO to Mecum to have them cross the block there. And so he knows them very well, but there's some things we want to kind of clear the air about after the fact that's being kind of thrown out there all over the social media and what you want to call it, but then also kind of touch on, because I know a lot of people, I got asked a question there a couple of times when I was leaving, from people asking, well, why so much, everything like that. And there's specific reasons why. And honestly, you can see where that was, I would say outlier, but it justified it because RM Sotheby's had their sale out in Arizona today. And some of the cars that were in there, you can see now, okay, there we go. That's where the market should be at. Just that the ones in the Bachman collection, they're very, very special cars. And I guess we could jump right out of the gate and start with the Enzo. So talk to us about the Enzo.
Yeah, the Enzo is a real special car, obviously, because, it had so many different special features. Obviously, it was one of the yellow cars, and there wasn't that many yellow cars. And, North America, I don't have the count in front of me right now, but I want to say it was 11 cars. And we did the research on it. I'm just trying to go through 48 cars in my head. But it was a neat car. Obviously, a lot of people, they first saw the car, they saw it with the red seats that were in there with the yellow Daytona stripes. And then they said, oh, well, I'm not really sure about the inside. They've always made, some sort of analogy about McDonald's that was always coming up and what was going on with the interior. But, Phil had a vision. Phil said, hey, look, let's go ahead and let's do something outside the box. The first color combo that was like that was on the 550 Barchetta. So he started that back in 01, a few years earlier. And he did, on the 355 Fiorano, he did the yellow and blue. So he either was going at that point yellow and blue or yellow and red. And the exterior was obviously yellow was a must. And then he would go ahead and modify. But like on that particular car, on the Enzo in particular, the uprights in the engine compartment, there's those two upright supports that go in the engine compartment. They were both polished. There was certain bits inside the engine compartment that are normally just matte carbon. His were glossed over and clear coated, and they were polished. You had the Enzo Ferrari signature on the rear deck lid. You had the lowers on the car, meaning the lower trim going all the way around, including the rear diffuser, painted in yellow from the factory. The car came off the assembly line with the black seats. So there's photos of the car, and if you looked at the videos that we made and we were running them, there was some photos of Phil working on the car, and we had all the additional photos. And it shows the car coming off the assembly line with the yellow seats. But Phil wanted the red ones, so the red ones just weren't ready. And before he picked up the car, because he went back to go ahead and take delivery of the car in Europe, he went back and then the red seats were installed at the factory. So the car left the factory with the red seats but the car came off the assembly line with the black seats. So the car came with 2 sets of seats, which was, super unique. The other thing was just the little other stuff that was in there. Some of the other pads on the doors and on the passenger side, there was a split. So you had the yellow leather. That was the only car I've ever seen like that. The only other car I saw that was really, really unique, but it wasn't obviously on Phil's, was Jean Tot's and Schumacher's car. There was 2 or 3 cars that had power windows in them. And that obviously was designed just on a couple of the cars. But Phil's car was a super unique car. He didn't have the power windows, but he had everything else on it. Super low miles. So that's why the car is, we always say in the auto industry, it did a moonshot. And we knew it was going to go ahead and do a big number. But when you get 2 guys and they're going at it, and the deal, once their ego gets behind, their bidding, then it becomes an ego battle. And, either one of them is saying, hey, look, I'm not going to lose. I know I'm probably overpaying for the car, but I'm not giving up. And, it started to run because the car started to stall out somewhere around 12 million. And I was standing up on the block next to Dana, and, we kind of, we would say, okay, we're looking at the board and we're saying, okay, I think it's starting to slow down, but the auctioneer did an amazing job.
Yeah.
He was still working it. And then it started to pick up again. And then it started to really jump. I think they were going by $250,000 bumps. And before you know it, just started going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then I looked back up, and within, it seemed like a minute, we were at 16 million plus. So now I'm like, okay, and you're looking around and I'm on the block, and I'm looking around, I'm looking left and looking right. And I'm saying, am I the only one who was like watching it? Like, it was almost like surreal on that car, because it was the highest one out of the whole collection, out of all 46 Ferraris. It was, the car that obviously did the most. And candidly, before that, we knew it was going to be there, but we were almost thinking that the F50 might outpace it after seeing the Ralph Lauren car at Pebble Beach. So that car, it was yellow, was one of the 2 yellow cars. But the flip side was it had some miles on it, but it was yellow, and it had, the provenance of Ralph Lauren that owned the car. Whereas on this car, it was single owner car. So you're saying to yourself, okay, we got a single owner car, and it's super, super unique, and you're getting ready to see the car, it's going to take off, So the numbers were really, really high. When it came to the F50, we kind of knew that it was going to do somewhere in that neighborhood. And again, it started to go back and forth between 2 guys again. And it ran up quite quickly, but 251 miles. Okay, so go find one. The only other one that I knew of, I sold when I worked for Roger Penske. I sold Roger Penske's car, and it's actually right down the road from here. The ex-Penske car is with Dr. Rick Workman. So he actually has that car. And he has some miles on it now. But, I sold it, I think it had 300 miles. And now it has somewhere around, I want to say 600 miles. But, we sold that car in 2009. And I want to say that we sold it for $975,000. And that was a huge number after the collapse of everything that happened in late 2008. So that was really a big number. And it came with all really cool stuff, the letters from Roger and back and forth with, Montezemolo. And it had some great, like I said, the provenance on the car is what drives it. So when you look at like the Bachman collection, and when you look at certain other cars, I always say it goes in this order. I mean, not exactly in this order, but these are the contributing factors that play in. You're going to have the car itself, obviously. You're going to have color, mileage, options. And if the car is, a paint to sample or something that's really unique, which a lot of the Bachman cars were, okay, so now you have a unicorn. And then you're going to look at mileage. The Bachman cars had, like, on the most part, super low mileage. And then you have what I call the intangible. Is it the last one? Was it the first one? Is it the last one that was delivered in the US? Is it one of the very last cars? And there's always people that just run for that. And, there was a lot of people that said to me, well, why did the F40, the 2 F40s, why did the 1 F40 do so much more money when the mileage difference between the car was roughly about 400 miles? both 1992s. One was delivered in Italy, one was delivered in the US. Well, the Italian car, to go ahead and get those EE plates that were on that car, you have to go ahead and get what they call in Italy the COC. And if you get the COC, you have to have an engine plate inside the engine compartment on the frame. Whereas US cars, we have it in the door jamb. That's the only F40 that I know of. And I checked with the guys at the factory and everyone else agreed with me. It was the only one that had two VIN plates. So when have you ever seen two VIN plates in a car? So, there was people that were doing their inspections and they were like just totally flustered about it, but we knew about it because we did the inspections. We went out there and we did the inspections. It was myself, Emiliano, and Marco. Marco and Emiliano both worked at the Ferrari factory for over 20 years, both of them. And, they had, they either one of them worked on the assembly line for many years, and then they eventually went on. In Emiliano's case, Emiliano went to the experimental department, and then obviously he was involved with Ferrari Classic K. It was the same thing with Marco. Marco obviously came from the production side, and then he went on the after sales side on the service business, and then eventually made his way back to Classic K and was in charge of Ferrari Classic K, and they worked together. So they knew exactly, what to look for. They were, Emiliano was, he was the boss on, on the assembly line, whether it was the 8-cylinder or the 12-cylinder line. And Marco was, similar. They worked their way up. He worked on the 288, and Emiliano was in charge of everything else. So, when you go through all that stuff, you get a chance to see all that.
Yeah, it's to your point, like first, last, produce, everything. There's gentlemen, individuals they collect first, last, everything like that. So it fits into their collection. But one owner, again, find another one, especially those because F50s, Enzos, F40s, everything. There's always usually a long chain of owners, at least a 2 or 3 on those.
For sure.
And then so you're trying to find that single owner stuff. It was very interesting to see. So, question though, because I know the gentleman very well. Did Ian have a little bit of seller's remorse?
No, what's funny? Ian, we arranged a dinner. Ian's a good friend of mine. So we had a dinner for all the people. So we had all the Italians, even Luca Zanetti, who was the current president and CEO of Ferrari North America. He came in, he had to leave. He couldn't make it to the auction, but it was kind of like a hit and run. So he came in and, he was there. We had a dinner at Ian's house and, we were all chatting. And Ian has, quite the collection. Ferrari Aperta, 458 Speciale Aperta. He's got some really, really cool stuff. And not a huge collection, we're talking about, maybe a dozen cars, but great stuff. 288 GTO, 275 GTB 4 cam. Just great stuff. And Ian's a good, they're mates, Ian and Tom Hartley Jr. And they put together an event every year that they do. And it's, Zach Brown goes on it. All kinds of guys go on this event that they do. It's a really cool event because look, at the end of the day, regardless of what car company you work for, we're car guys, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We all love cars and there's that camaraderie between all of us. So it was good. We were all together and I had all the guys there from Ferrari. I had a few other guests that were there, some clients, good friends, what have you. And everybody loved it. It was fun to get everybody primed up. So I said, Ian, are you going to come to the auction? And Ian's like, yeah, I'm going to be there. He said, I'm going to go ahead and bring Joshua, his son. And we went over there and, it was awesome. He had another friend of his with him and it was good. We were all there and Ian sold the car. Funny story about the car. Not everybody knows the story. We kind of talked about it and it's kind of been brushed over, but the real story is this. Phil Bachman went to the factory in 1995. So he was invited to see the car. They showed him the car before they unveiled it in Geneva in 1995, the F50. And he went to the factory and he was coming back to do some configuration. So it was a few months after that. I think Geneva was in March. So it might have been May or June. It was a little warm out. Phil showed up. He got there a little early. He used to stay at the hotel Maranello Palace or one of the other hotels that are right there. And he was casual. So he showed up in like a shirt and a pair of jeans, normally how you travel on an airplane. And normally when you go inside the factory, generally speaking, you show up with slacks on, dress shirt, tie, and a jacket. Times have changed since 1995, 30 plus years. Not everybody's wearing a tie every day, but sometimes it's the open collar look, but you still have a sport jacket on and, you look sharp. And I always joke, Italians get dressed up to go ahead and go get gasoline, or petrol or whatever they do. They're dressed up. They're dressed up for everything.
Yeah.
So he got there, and somebody made a little bit of an off-color comment saying, Phil, you should be, more conscious of when you come here, you should show up with a jacket and tie on. And what happened was he stopped. He was at the traffic light, from my understanding with the story, outside the factory. Somebody saw him and said, Phil, come on in, have a quick, espresso. So Phil said, okay, he was a little tired, obviously. And he parked the car and he just walked across the street because the hotel is, across the street. And he went in, or, down the road, and whatever it is, I don't know which hotel he stayed at, but anyway, he goes in and somebody sees him and they make this comment to him, you should be here and, you should know better than to do this. Well, he flipped out. So he canceled the F50 and he canceled the F512M. And I think he knew that they were making a replacement car for the F512M, which was the Maranello, which if you look at the collection, he never had one. So Phil canceled those cars. He surely would have had car number 3 of the F50 in yellow, because there was 2 that were made for the US. There was Paul Frame's car, there was Ralph Lauren's car, and for sure he would have had a yellow one. So who knows the way the world would have changed. And he didn't get a car. So he canceled everything. So it took Simone Scudoni years to go ahead and mend the fences. So he didn't buy any cars until 1999 when he got the 355 Fiorano. And when we were going through the collection, through the archive, we saw all the faxes, because there was no emails back then, of Simone writing sending a fax to Phil and saying, Phil, I just want to let you know, I saw Loris Cheffa, and Loris works for Zanazzi now. And he said, hey, I saw Loris, and they're going to be coming out with a limited edition 355. It's going to be numbered. And he slowly got Phil back into the deal. And sure enough, bygones are be bygones. But I think, look, Phil dug in, and for 4 years, he didn't get a car. He went from 95 to 99. He didn't get a new vehicle, nothing. And they came out with some pretty stout cars in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had the Maranello. Obviously, he missed out on the F512M, and he missed out on the F50. So going back to your original question, how he got the car, he wanted a really low mileage car, and he knew that Ian had the car. And from my understanding, the market on the car at that point in time, it's about 10 years ago, was about 1.75 million for a perfect car. And we know where it was in 2009, because I sold the Penske car, and that was 975,000. So the car was going up still, no matter what was going on in the world. Then Ian says in his head, well, I'll just double it and I'll go for 3.5. And at the time, Ian had some other stuff going on in his life. He had, he was in the middle of construction on a house, and, there was some issues there. And, he was, Ian said, look, if I'm going to free up a car, I'm going to have to free up a car. And only if this guy gives me some number that's out of this world. So he doubled it, and he said,
there it was.
And, that's a big number. So I want to bring that up because it's very important considering what happened in the Bachman collection today. So if people say that, okay, a car is worth, and let's say an Enzo's worth 7-8 million, but somebody said, well, I'm not going to sell the car. Well, if somebody gave you 16 million, 17 million for the car, would you sell it? Sure, I'd sell it. That's kind of what happened with the Enzo, because it was a real unique car. You're not going to find another one like it.
Yeah.
And that's why these numbers did these moonshots. And, you had a lot of people out there on the internet saying, oh, it was for charity, and that's why it was like that. I said, absolutely
not. Clarify that.
Yeah, it was a standard auction. So the cars were sold through Mecum Auctions. It wasn't a charity. To be a charity, the purchaser has to purchase the cars from the Bachman Foundation. Now, they have a foundation. Most people, when you're going to go ahead and take in this kind of money, I mean, the sale brought in with fees $125 million. Of course, they're going to sell it most times, not always, but they set up a foundation. And the Bachman Foundation is, based in the Eastern Tennessee, and they're going to do a lot of good things to help, different people and different things. They want to do some stuff with, some technicians. They want to build a school, to help, young mechanics and stuff like this. So, I mean, they have a bunch of different things in their mission statement, but the point was, it's a little bit of a tax shelter for them. But the cars were not sold directly from the Bachman Foundation to whoever, Mr. John A. Smith, who purchased the car. He purchased the car from Mecum Auctions. So it was thrown out there, and there was a few people that put it out there, and even people that worked at other auction houses. And I was quick to go ahead and reach out to them. I said, look, you got to clarify this. And sure enough, they edited the post, or they, we took it down or whatever it was, but it got cleared up very, very quickly, because everyone's like, hey, this is impossible. Then you had, a whole other load of people saying, oh, is it real? One thing about a no reserve auction, when you have a reserve auction, it's real easy to run up the number on a no reserve auction. Well, you have an internet bidder here or there. Like, you really don't know, because they're trying to run it up. But when you have a no reserve auction, it's like musical chairs. If you go ahead, you better make sure you have a seat when the music stops.
Yeah.
So, you can't go ahead and play that game, especially when you start getting in these high numbers. There was two people on the room. Now, one of the people that was bidding pretty high up, because it takes two to run it up. So obviously, if there's one guy paying it, regardless of whoever he is, and there's a lot of people that had comments, well, this guy's this, and his business isn't real, or whatever the case may be, there was still a guy right behind him running it up. And the guy that was behind him is an authorized Ferrari dealer in North America.
Oh, really?
So, oh yeah. And they were the underbidder on a bunch of the cars. And obviously they had a client who was a well-to-do client and pretty well-known client that wanted these cars. So again, this goes back to the original conversation. When you get a guy that's a multi-millionaire, maybe a billionaire, in this case, I believe he is a billionaire, and he says, look, I don't want to know anything. I want those cars. And in his mind, he pulls out a number. He says, look, I'm going to drop 30, 40, 50, 70, whatever the number is, million. I want these cars. He's willing to do it. So he's saying to himself, where am I ever going to get a chance again to see all these cars in one place that I can get them? And regardless of, whether he super loved the look of them, there was a lot of people that said to me, wow, I saw these cars in the catalog. I saw them in the video, and, we had all the big bright lights on them and the colors were really exploding. When they saw them in real life, they were like, wow, they're not as vibrant and not as bright as I thought. And a lot of times people looked at them and they said, it actually works. And, I thought I wouldn't like it. There was a lot of that. I honest to God, there was probably more people that came up to us and said, I didn't think I was going to like this car in person, and it's really cool. There was a lot of people that said that. And, it was good. And people said to me, they said, what's your favorite car? And I would turn around and point at the 275. And, it was funny. I saw Rick Hendrick the night before, and we chatted. And I said, look, if you're going to buy one car in the collection, that's the car. And Andy Thomas, he has a 1010s club, and Andy Thomas works for him. And Andy actually was my rep at Ferrari North America over 20 years ago. And actually, Andy and I were the first two to see the Bachman Enzo when it came into the US. And I actually still have the email from 2004 when the car came into the US when it got unloaded. So look, for us, it was like full circle. Andy, we're staring at the Enzo. And I said, hey, you remember the two of us staring at that car? And then we're turning our heads. And he says, what's your favorite car? And, there's 46 of them there. I said, hands down, the 275.
Yeah, I think it was stunning.
And it was a stunning car, right? So there's 16 of them, and well, that's the accepted number. There's no official number out of the factory, because at that point in time, some of the build sheets they would mark if it was an alloy, and some of them they didn't. So the cars exist as an alloy, and it's just, their notes weren't super detailed at that point. There was a point where their notes weren't the super best, but when you get into like a build sheet or you start to see the purchase order, if you have the original purchase order, it would show that the car was ordered as an alloy. That car was born as a fly yellow car, and it lived most of its time with one gentleman, and then it went to another guy, and then to Phil. Phil had the car restored by David Cart, who has since passed away during either right during COVID or right after COVID. But he was out of Virginia, and those three cars that we had on the stage, we had the Chairs and Flair 246, we had the 275 GTB4, and then we had off to the right of that, we had the Lusso. But that car, for me, when people ask me what was my favorite car, I said the 275 GTB4 alloy was my favorite car. It's not even close. And then, when I walked in the other room, I had Dana's 275 Nart, which was sitting in the other room, right? So when you look at that car, and as much as I love the Nart, the 275 GTB4 alloy is just my favorite car. John Shirley's 275 Nart is the ultimate rock star. They made 10 cars. Dana's car, the silver one, is number 9. And the number two car is John Shirley's. And I was talking to John, talking about the 250 GTO, and I saw John and we were chatting. That car lived legitimately a quarter mile from my high school for many years in New Jersey. And I used to see the car driving around all the time. And then, as time goes on, the internet builds and you start doing your Google and you start looking things up. And you say to yourself, man, I wonder what happened to that car. Sure enough, John Shirley has it. So when we went up there to go see John and Dana and myself, we went to go put together the deal for the 250 GTO. I saw the car. Now, we're there to look at a 250 GTO. I'm all over the Nart because me growing up, I'm like, hey, this is the car I used to see all the time. So it's funny because, you see a car and you identify something about it, whether it was
triggers,
right.
something.
And for me, the other car that does that is the 308. So for me, the 308 triggers it big time because, growing up watching Magnum PI, I remember watching it, it was like for whatever night, it was like Thursday night, Magnum PI would go on and it was a weekly show. And then for me, fast forward, I joined the Marines when I'm 17. I get stationed in Hawaii. I know where the Higgins, Robin Masters estate is, it's in Waimanalo. And then fast forward, and I'm the general manager of the store in Hawaii. So when they did the new version of Magnum PI, I would see the Ferrari, with the Robin 1 plate. We were doing the service on the cars that they used for the show. So it's so funny for me, like full circle, for that car. And then, the last but not least car for me was the 288 GTO because I mentioned to you on the earlier podcast, growing up, I grew up with a family that was really involved with Benjamin Moore paint. And they went to the Ferrari Club Nationals every year and they had Ferraris. And, we would go to the National and we would show the cars. And this was going all the way back in the 1980s. And I remember going to Watkins Glen in 1984 and they had the first, maybe it was 85, but maybe it was 85. It might've been 1985. I forget what year it was, but they had the Ferrari Club National at the Glen. And we were, watching, the 288 GTO that was there, and they had the first Testarossa in the United States come. And that was a big deal for the Testarossa because remember the BB, 512 and the BB 512i, that car was never, homologated for the United States, right?
Yeah.
Right. So the cars that came in were the old quote unquote gray market cars. And, you would see them. And then, it wasn't like today where you go say, listen, let's look on the internet and see what the differences are. The car would show up and we were like, okay, it has a body colored bottom, but the other ones have a black bottom, right? So, that was an option that came out on the real later BBs. So it was like all that different stuff. And you would see it in the Bachman collection. So when we were looking at the Bachman collection, we were saying, like I can identify with every car. Like I could see the difference between a BB512. I could see the difference with a BB512i. I could see the difference in, whatever the car was. I can quickly look, and they said, well, the cars are the same. I said, no, they're not the same. They're like, oh, the interior is different. I'm like, no, they're two different cars. This one was delivered to, a German market. Look at the grill, look at the lights, behind the grill.
Marker lights.
And right. And then people would look and they say, oh my God, I didn't even notice that. So it was just a question of, really educating people listen, I had a blast. Like we had such a great time, during the week doing everything. It was really, really, really just an awesome week. I can't tell you how much fun we had. And honestly, hats off to the Mecum crew. They were amazing. Brett, Dana, Dam, Brianne. I mean, look, the list just goes on and on and on. Like everybody there was there to help you. Just you name it, Mike, Harold. I mean, look, it just keeps going on and on and on. Everywhere I went to, they were just such an accommodating team. Even Dominic, the guy that runs the golf carts, hey, we need to grab somebody. Hey, we need to do this. Hey, we got to grab this guy. I mean, like everybody, like they were just awesome, just an amazing team. And to do everything that they did from the beginning of October to have it to the market in 90 days, it was unheard of. I've never seen anything like that. The presentation was just over the top. And it just
they nailed it.
I can't. It just killed it. I mean, it was like nothing else I've ever seen. Recreating the garage upstairs. We had that little loft up on.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And we brought people up there, and they would go through the archive, and they'd say, "Hey," and, the thing that we, including Marco, myself, and Emiliano, we would see people, and they'd be going through like multiple cars, and it was probably a little strange to us because we would say to them, "Hey, fellas, how are you? Good. Hey, you guys need help with anything?" They're like, "No, I'm good." And it was, and you could see the big screens playing, and it has me, Emiliano, and Marco. Like if you watch the video, you could easily say, "Hey, wait a second, they're the guys that are in the video. They're talking about this. Maybe they know something that I don't know.
They might know a little something."
And they would look at me, and the typical Italian phrase, "There's no words talk," but they go like this. They do this, and we were laughing, and I'd say, I don't know what to tell you. We would talk to people, say, "Hey, fellas, you need any help with anything? Let us know." But everybody doesn't want to show their hand, or whether they're in the middle of looking at something. Maybe they don't want you to know who they're looking for, or whatever the case is. But we were like, "Hey, listen, we're here to help. If you have any questions, if you want to go through the car." And then it was the opposite on the other side. You had people show up and say, "Hey, listen, I watched the videos online. I've been watching the stuff on YouTube. Love the video. Can you walk me through this car?" Absolutely. And we would spend as much time as we needed. There was people that we got there. There was one gentleman, he got there at 10 a.m. He left at 4. And I was with him for 6 hours. And I went through every single car. He took notes. I know for sure that he bid on a lot of cars. I'm not quite sure if he won anything, but I know he was in the race towards the end on a few of the cars. So look, it was enjoyable because, again, goes back to the beginning of the question. Why did the cars do all these numbers?
Yeah.
Because, we took that time, we educated some people, they saw the value in the car, because there was people that even looked at the catalog and they'd say, I went through it and it says, "Hey, this is the last one for the US," or "This is there was this many made in yellow," or "With this color combination, it's one of X amount." Yeah, let me go ahead and run it through you. Let me show you something on it. And then they would look at the car, and they might even be on that car. And then they look at the car next to it and say, I looked at this car and I didn't really think I'd like it, but this is a really cool car. So it was kind of cool. Like, when I spoke to Tom Cabarizio, from Garage 26, they got a great Instagram page, and they're down in Miami.
I've been in their collection. That's unbelievable.
So he picked up a few cars, right? So he wound up with about 4 cars, and we were going through it, and he was, and I knew the other guy, the guy out of Connecticut that was running against him, right, on those cars. So everybody thought that it was the same guys that were bidding on the same cars, which wasn't the case. There was multiple people. And then on the big cars, there was a group of guys. Then there was like on the other stuff, like I said, like the 348s, the 328s, they were trying to fill in. Then there was the vintage guys, guys that were chasing the Lusso and the Chairs and Flares car. Then there was guys that were chasing just the BBs. There was a bunch of guys that just came in on the BBs. Then there was the guys that were saying, hey, I already have a 288 GTO, but I want one that's like pristine.
Yeah.
So now
one owner,
they,
that mileage.
right.
Yeah.
So now they're hoping, they were cheering. There was guys that had the car that were cheering that the car would keep going up because, again, look, they have the car. They may have bought in who knows when. It could have been 10 years ago. It could have been 20 years ago. But there was people that bought in obviously considerably less. And they were like, they were,
oh, heck yeah.
Because
it's like, go higher.
Saying, hey, this is great because now
helps
look,
their
I'm
cause.
watching this thing go. When people said to me at the very end, is there any cars that I thought did less than what they were going to do? And I said, yeah, there was one car in particular, the 166mm. That
surprised me.
Somebody got a killer deal on that car because they paid, I think, all in around $2 million, and it should have did at least $1 million more. And I chatted with Brian Ross about it, and Brian's got an amazing collection. And he's a Ferrari dealer up in Vancouver. And look, we're all friends. We're all friends with each other. And we were really, really surprised. Even Emiliano and Marco, we thought that the car was going to do closer to 3 million or somewhere like up in that range for sure. And again, there was people that expressed interest, and I don't know if something was going on in their life or they just didn't get on the phone, because there was people who did register. They got pre-authorized, pre-approved, with their letters, and didn't bid. And then there was people who got there and they looked at the cars, and then maybe they walked around and they said, hey, you know what? I really love this 599 SA Aperta. I love the car, but this color combo, the yellow and green, it's just not me. But there's another one for sale in the auction. So Dana had over 125 Ferraris in the sale.
Yeah, that was outstanding. What they had outside of the Bachman collection as well. I mean, there was some blue chip stuff in there.
Oh my God, yeah. And then like the other Enzo, the Rosso Dino car that came from Gerald Barnes. Strong. So that car, that was another car Dana and I worked on together. Dana and I were chatting on the phone every single day, and that went back to, I don't know, either I want to say October or November. We were chatting about that, and Dana in November, I think it was. And, we were trying to lock that thing up, and Dana was saying to me, he said, hey, there's multiple cars in the package, and we were chatting what we thought they were going to do. And there was a paint to sample 918 that was part of the package that Rick Hendrick got that car.
Yeah.
And, again, the same players that were involved on the cars on Saturday, that car ran on Friday, the 918 Spider. It was the same guys that were in the same mix. But, when they lose the day before, they sleep on it, and then they wake up and they say, I'm not losing on that Enzo. I don't care what it takes. So when you get a guy like that and his ego gets behind his, behind the thought, now you're like, okay, listen, this is going to be a horse race now. This is really going to go at it. And sure enough, that's what happened. But, case in point, people say, oh, it's just the Bachman cars or whatever the case is. I say, okay, well then explain to me why the Rosso Dino Enzo did the number it did. Because listen, if that car was regular red, Rosso Corsa, it does millions less because it's a more common car. But once you get into rare shades and it's one of 2, 3, 1, whatever the case may be, that's it. It's game on at that point.
Yeah, it's great to see that too. It just it just validates in regards to that, especially doing, you got your personalization and everything like that and doing it. Yeah, some stuff might come out, might not be someone's taste, but it is someone's taste, and just makes it that much more special as compared to all the other ones. Especially if someone goes to, the FCA meets, stuff like that. They take that, they're not going to be lined up like one after another, all the same color or anything like that. It's like, nope. We know whose that is. We know where it came from. It stands out. It makes it that much more special, which is great to see. You take pride in that. You take pride in that.
Absolutely. We did a car. I don't know. I guess it was right around this time we were chatting, and there was an F12 and a 488 Spider that were both done without paint. So if you remember the Mercury pilots, they're Mercury astronauts. They had
Yeah.
all aluminum, no paint Cobras. And then quickly, Rathman Chevrolet, which isn't far from here, it was right down the road on the Space Coast. A lot of the astronauts at that time had Corvettes, and they had some deal hooked up with Rathman. And Jim Rathman won the Indianapolis 500 back in the 50s, and he had a Chevrolet dealership. So I saw an article, and I was flipping through a magazine, and I saw an all aluminum Cobra from one of the astronauts. Then fast forward, I knew that there was an F-12 TDF that was done in the States that had no paint on it. And then there was obviously a 488 Spider that was done the same way. So sure enough, we did the same thing with an A12 Competizione. And my one client had it, and we built it, and he kept the car for, a couple of years. And then it was sitting at the dealership, and another collector, another gentleman that's out of the New York area originally, he saw the car, and he's like, I got to have that car. And at the time, it was a world record. And people are like, oh, you're nuts, this, that, you're paying crazy money. Well, here it is, further down the road, not quite a year later, the car probably went up $750,000 more than what he paid. He paid like a world record for that car already. So his A12 Competizione is worth tons of money. And it's an exact same mirror image of what happened in the Bachman collection. The Bachman collection, when you looked at that F12 TDF, okay, that was one of the cars that people saw in person. They said, wow, it's really, it's not as wild as I thought it would be. And, again, when you look at a car like that, and then, we put so much time into detailing, we brought in a gentleman named Squeaky Pete Wedge. He's out of Miami area, really well-known detailer. He brought his team, his brother Sam, and a few of the boys down. And they all showed up there. And I'm telling you right now, they camped out, and we had those cars looking like glass.
Because gleaming. Oh, yeah.
I mean, they were like glass. I mean, we really, really worked on them as if we were doing Concours restorations. And listen, he could have spent even more time on each car and really made them look like legitimate, like glass. But they looked unbelievable. And people were coming in and they said, man, I've never seen cars pop like that. And, Dana's guys had the light pop in the right way. When the cars went on stage, if you just watch those videos, and Dana ran through 4,000 plus cars, there's no cars that look better shine wise. There's cars. There's cars that look really, really close. When you looked at the Yanko collection and some other cars, those cars were spot on too. But when they went up on that stage, especially like the older cars, the 275 and the Lusso with the Barani wheels and the chrome bumpers, when those cars hit the stage, I mean, they looked electric. Like I was just sitting up on the stage, and there's a bunch of candid shots that people sent to me of me looking, and I'm up there, and I'm leaning over on the top of the block, and I'm smiling, and I'm like, yeah, they just said these cars look like movie stars. Like they just looked so perfect. And that's why they brought the money. So I tell people, it wasn't just one thing or one bidder. That helps, obviously, but there was so much the road to the sale that got those cars to bring it there. The storyline that we did, the videos, the whole Mecum team getting the catalogs made the way they did. The catalog was absolutely amazing. The data that was in there, the online presence, Mecum doing it, us doing it, the dealership doing it, just everything, and everybody did their part. And then it was like, okay, when are we going to get a chance to find another car like this? And believe me, a lot of people sat back and said, I've been in this business a long time. I've never seen anything like this in my entire life, of just Ferraris that are this cool, this eclectic, or whatever the case may have been, in this condition, with this mileage, single owner, on a lot of the cases.
Yeah,
not obviously the ones that it was unbelievable.
I won't see it again. I probably won't see it again.
And listen, I've been doing 30 years, never saw it ever happen. So for me, it was really, really special to be part of it, and obviously, develop a relationship, friendship with you and a lot of other people. It was just, it was honestly, when I look back, if I look back and I say, okay, look, you're going to do your testimonial on your career and say, what was like the highlight, for sure.
That's going to be up there.
Oh, absolutely. It was right there.
Yeah, definitely up there. There's two also I want to touch on because I absolutely love them. And the yellow one brought, good, strong money, but the green one, that really opened up eyes in the two 360 Challenge Stradales.
Oh my God, yeah. So the 360 Challenge Stradales, people would look at the first one. He went all out. So it was like, when we looked at like the 599 SA Aperta, and we looked at the 599 GTO, and even like the 360 Challenge Stradale, the yellow one, it was almost like if you said, okay, look, here's an option list, and these are all the little things we can do. It was almost like when you see that one, it's like select all. That's all. It's like, okay, but they didn't have that back then, right? So it was almost like select all, and that's when you would look and you would say, okay, he did every single thing, like the headlight buckets on the 360 Challenge Stradale, all the little detail work, and you saw the same thing in the 16Ms, but the green Challenge Stradale,
God, that was gorgeous.
And that was another one of my favorites. So that was in my top 5. So when I would look at that car, and I said to myself, oh my God, I said, this car is just an absolute rock star. And when you saw it all polished up, people were going crazy for that car, and that car did a monster number.
Yeah. Was that the only Challenge Stradale in green produced, or is there any other?
No, I think there was 2 in green, but I'm not sure if there was another one in that exact shade, because there was 1,300 cars that were produced. But I got to get the catalog. It's funny. I went through the catalog, and I knew the thing inside and out when we were producing the catalog, because we were constantly going back and editing and, let's double check this. So, this one has a Class K certification. This one doesn't. But on that particular car, the seats that were in the car came with 2 sets of seats as well. So the original seats in there had the red in them. And, with the red seats, although they're very, very cool, it had a little bit of that Christmas tree look. You had green car with the red seats, and then Phil got another set of seats, and he ordered another set of seats, and he went ahead and he continued on what he wanted to do as far as the green that was in there. And candidly, it looked great. And look, it was colors that were offered at the time. You had to go ahead and do an extra Campanario request, but they were Alcantara colors that were available at the time. But Ferrari at that point in time, that's really when they were switching over from the original Carrozzeria Scaglietti program, and then they were moving into what they called Atelier. Atelier became TaylorMade, and then it started to build more and more and more. So as time went on, you would actually see how they evolved. And, a lot of the other brands started to do it. And, Bentley was probably, I always talk about it. Bentley was probably like the originators of this program. Their Mulliner program and their Mulliner division is unbelievable. And then, you had Rolls-Royce doing it, with their bespoke program. And you saw all the top companies in the world starting to do it. And as time went on, people would start to do the customization, and it's a huge business now for Ferrari. It's massive. And Phil, I tell people, you would see Dreamlines on Phil's cars. Dreamlines are like pretty common now on cars, but Phil was like the originator. He had Dreamlines on the wheels, even their FXX, which who customizes a race car? It was the only one that was originally produced in yellow. There's been a few guys that when they did the Evo upgrade, or they sent the cars back now that they've upgraded. I think there's 3 yellow ones that are out there floating around, but 2 or 3. And but Phil's is the only original one. And that also was a car that was a deal, because I thought at $6 million.
Yeah, I did too.
That was a good deal for that car. So I'm not sure who got the car. I haven't gone through the whole list and see who the purchasers were, but it's I'm happy for everybody who got them. And there's been people who have reached out to me at the dealership and have said, hey man, I know that you were up there and I saw you quickly and I didn't get a chance to chat with you, but I knew obviously I have the catalog and it says Prancing Horse in Nashville. And, I just wanted to chat with you about the car. And I was on the phone with a gentleman yesterday. He bought actually the F40, and I was telling him some stuff and he was like floored. He's like, oh, you're kidding me. I said, no. And I said, when did you see the collection? He said, you know what? He said, I saw the collection years ago. I met Phil and Martha Bachman years ago. And, I knew who they were and I knew how well they took care of the cars. And there was a lot of that too. There was people who knew the Bachmans or competed against them at an FCA event or at Cavallino or whatever it was. And more times than not, they lost out to them. That their cars were always super pristine.
Yeah.
So they said, you know what, we lost out to them, but now's my chance to get it. And I always said, hey, if that car ever comes for sale, I want to make a run at it. And, we had calls. It was nonstop. Dana had calls. We had calls at the dealership. Hey, I really want to buy that car. Okay. But I want you to pull it out of the collection.
Oh,
okay. No problem. What do you want to offer?
Yeah.
And they would say to me, I'm going to make a bid that's, like an astronomical number. Okay. What are you going to bid? And they would say, I'm going to go ahead and bid, let's say like on the Enzo, I'm going to bid $8 million. And we knew that it was definitely going to do more than that because, we were chatting with a lot of people. And I'd say, you're a little short, bud. And they'd say, okay, 9. And I'd say, no.
Still short, buddy.
I said, the first number starts with a 1. And he'd say, and I said, we already had people beforehand that were saying, look, I think the car is going to do 10 to 12 million. And then you had people, for us to pull a car out of the sale, or at least we couldn't. We'd have to approach the family and the foundation. For us to pull a car, it would have to be some crazy number. And he said, well, what's crazy? And I said, north of 15. The guy's exact words were, you're dreaming. The car will never do that. I said, well, look, guess what? We're going to have to see. Car did 17 and change, almost 18 million. So, And again, this is even me saying it. If you would have told me that the car was going to do that number, I would have been just like that same guy. I would have said, you're crazy. Car's never going to do that number. But it did it. And it took 2 people to go at it to get to that number.
Yeah, everyone was, prior to it, 10, 12, and like that, which I was like, it's about, maybe a little bit more, but, hey, it takes 2 to tango. And they start jacking that thing up and going, which is awesome to see, because, the excitement in the room was phenomenal. It was just fantastic to see.
It was unbelievable.
Energy.
It honestly was. It really was unbelievable. But you know what? It was awesome, and I'm happy, to continue these on and talk more about, more cars and more things. It's been super, super fun to do all this stuff. It was great.
Yeah. I know you got to get going because I know you still got to pack. And I see your wife walk around the background. She's probably eyeballing you. But real quick on the 250 GTO, I thought it went right where it should have been. It was fantastic. But the one cool thing is David Lee is the new owner of that, which is fantastic because he loves to exercise and show his cars like that. So I think that, ownership, how he goes about it, the same as John did, showcased it with people, shared it and everything like that. So I think it was awesome to see that he was the one that ended up with it.
For sure. And David, it's funny, because when you look at David's collection, it's red and yellow, right? So I said, well, the car's already been yellow. Let's just hope, it's already been red. Let's hope that he doesn't make it yellow.
Yeah.
It was, it was really a lot of fun. And, it was going back and forth. And you saw the famous photo of Dana with the hats down sideways, when he's negotiating with Kevin, who was the broker that was helping him in the sale. So, you could see, they were trying to get it over the finish line. And it was one of those deals that, when people say to me, like, what do you feel about the number? I said, I thought it was a little light, but not by like a crazy number, because look, it was a right-hand drive car. If we were in a right-hand drive country, it probably would have helped considerably. But in our case, a lot of people that, it's like throwing a baseball. If you're, I'm truly ambidextrous. I do things left-handed and right-handed. But for people who aren't that way, if you get in a car and when they try to shift, it's almost like trying to throw a baseball. It's almost like,
oh, that's so awkward.
It's very awkward, right? So I've been with people who, like, I can't do that. I just can't imagine doing it. So mentally, they get themselves out of it. Like right off the bat, they're like, yeah, I don't think I can do that. The flip side to that is the engine wasn't original. But then again, look, a lot of engines weren't original on a lot of cars. Even some of the 250 GTOs have had some pretty, rough stories. I mean, there's cars that have been in accidents. Drivers were even killed in them, one or two of the cars, right? So there was part of that. But the car had a great story, obviously, with John Coombs and how it had the vents on the hood. And, the car came out of the factory like the rest of them with the 2 vents on the side. And then after the car had an accident, and then there was some sheet metal work done. And they added the third vent on the side and the vents on the hood. And, the car was mainly raced only in the UK. So it didn't do the, international tour. It didn't go to Le Mans, Targa Florio, what have you. Didn't do any of that. So, the car really was limited to, it did a lot of, racing at the time in Goodwood, but, it had an interesting story about, Jaguar reverse engineering the car, and, they loved it, and, it helped them develop the E-Type further. So, excuse me, it was a great car. It had a great story. John, was amazing with it. John took the car, and John used the car for, 25 plus years. He bought the car in 1999, and he had he took it everywhere. Whether it was in the UK, the car was on these tours in Italy. He had tours that he did in Europe. He took the cars and he raced it at Laguna and different track events in North America. Took the car to Pebble, you name it. So I think David, to your point, is going to do similar.
Yeah, and continue a long ownership history, not just, a couple of years, move it on. He'll be another one that's going to keep it 10, 15, 20 years. So that's what's awesome to see about that as well. So,
absolutely,
it's good stuff. But hey, I appreciate you coming on. We're going to definitely get you on a lot more, and we're going to do some other fun stuff somewhere down the road. We got to start doing some more things together. So,
I appreciate it. It's been fun. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the next one. Yeah.
Safe travels to Retromobile and going over to the UK. That's going to be a lot of fun there as well. So enjoy your time. And again, appreciate it, and see you next time.
All right, bud. Look forward to it. See you guys soon. Take care.